Everyone, and welcome to People of Interest. I'm your host, Miguel Guanipa. People of Interest is a show based on the stories from people like me and you. I have a special guest today. Every guest is special, pretty much, but this guy I think is really kind of special. I know him personally. He's a fellow craftsman, and he's a pretty smart guy. I have some interesting conversations sometimes with him, and his crafts is basically restoring furniture, and his name is Francis Trainor. Francis, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Miguel, for having me.
Okay, I'm gonna steal an hour of your life today, if that's okay.
I look forward to it.
All right. Now we have the gray background because you said you want it to be real, in a sense. This is we are in a studio, so you don't want anything back there that shows some imaginary anything. You want the real thing. This is what we are.
hmm
Could you play around with that for me a little bit and tell me what were you
Um,
thinking there?
I think for my life, personally, it's important for me to keep my feet on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to try to, people use the word stay grounded,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And different people do that in different ways.
Yeah.
For me, I suppose I've worked pretty hard over the last 30 years
Yeah.
to try to clear away as much emotional chaos in my head, confusion as I could, so I could try to see the world as clearly as possible.
Hmm.
So as you could say, to try to be as unfiltered as I could, or unidealistic, or unideological, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I suppose my goal would be to have no ideology,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And just see everything for what it is, as clearly as possible. And in many ways, on the interpersonal level, it would be important to look at someone and see them,
Hmm.
right? To see whether they were suffering that day, or were happy that day, or were indifferent that day. But to try to see them as clearly as possible.
Hmm. That's pretty deep, pretty quick.
Yes, I've been accused of that a few times in my life.
I like that because sometimes I've been accused of that too,
hmm
and you know, sometimes I'm told you can't always be deep right away with everybody, but you're
Yes.
fine here with me. You're fine here because.
Yes. I think we both have tried to get into things and try to
Mhm.
understand them.
Yeah.
That's not for everyone, but I guess for you and I, it's the way in which we are.
So you mentioned emotion. Emotion has been like a big part of your life that has been kind of that block that is for or against you at times. Would you say or?
Yeah. I think I've suffered, like many people, from depression,
Mm-hmm.
and
Hmm.
crippling depression at periods in my life,
Yeah.
and worked very hard to sort of, I guess, I wouldn't say overcome that, but let that go.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Meaning that that doesn't mean to ignore it, does it? What does that mean to let it
No,
go? Let go of the
this
depression.
this will be a little odd,
That's fine.
but I was in therapy, and there was this idea called self-hypnosis,
Mm-hmm.
and I was reading about it, and so I tried it. You know, and imagine yourself. Uh, you try to put yourself in a calm state of mind with your eyes closed, and then you imagine yourself walking down a flight of stairs, and then walking through a door, and on the other side of that door is your deepest mind.
Hmm.
And most people do it in a session with a therapist, and they're talking to their therapist while this is happening. I couldn't do that. I did it at home alone, and the inside of my mind was in tremendous conflict.
Mm.
And the first time I went into my subconscious, uh, it was an incredibly violent experience.
Mm.
And I spent about two
Hmm.
and a half years inside my head, 3 times a week, uh, negotiating with myself
Hmm.
to sort of um, negotiate a peace treaty, you could say, with my own psyche,
Mm-hmm.
to come to what's the right language? It's hard to find the language for this.
The terms,
Come
not the
to
terms,
terms uh,
to a truce.
to I had a very strong defense mechanisms to try to protect myself,
Mm-hmm.
like over defensive. And this part of my mind turned out to be quite a primitive, um, emotional being. It didn't have any subtlety, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it would just try to, at all costs, keep me small because it was afraid to let go. And so I guess the word is letting go. I had to let go of all kinds of things
Mm-hmm.
to free myself a little bit, to find contentment.
To find contentment.
Yes, to
Okay.
be at peace with myself.
And have you been somewhat successful in the endeavor, you feel?
Yeah, it's been years since I've had any depression at all.
Wow. That's
No
great.
drugs involved, you know.
That's great.
It was also combined with Buddhist meditation,
Mm-hmm.
which I have to do every day. So, unlike a lot of people who can just live their lives, I have to do many things every day to ensure I can live a reasonably peaceful life.
Hmm. Well, let's go back a little bit then.
Sure.
Let's go back to where did you grow up?
I grew up in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Okay. Worcester?
Worcester. Or Worcester, as
Worcester.
people from Worcester would
And
say.
you like your family? How many brothers and sisters did you
I've
have?
got 2 brothers and a sister. I'm the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
My father was an elementary school principal,
Mm-hmm.
and my mother was a housewife. We grew up Roman Catholic, and my father was a very interesting guy in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with Dorothy Day,
Doesn't ring a bell right away.
the Catholic worker,
Okay.
in the whole Catholic worker movement?
Mm-hmm.
She started all those um, homeless shelters
Yeah.
across the entire country. Um, and that Catholic ethos of being of service was very important to my father.
Mm.
So we grew up in a household where my father would always pick the poorest school in the city to work at to try to improve it. And his view of the world was those in most need the most help, right? And if you have extra, it's your duty to sacrifice so they can have a reasonably good life.
Mm-hmm.
So we lived in a household where um, at Christmas time, every kid in his school had a winter jacket, you know? So I may have a hand-me-down and not a new one.
Yeah.
And at Thanksgiving, they all had turkeys on their tables, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that may mean we couldn't have a huge meal, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that ethos sort of stuck with me.
What did he do it at the neglect of you guys in some respect?
No,
Or? Oh, okay. All
not
right.
at the neglect of
All
us.
right.
But we didn't have a lot of new shiny stuff, you
Right.
know? I never got a new bike. I had a sort of, piece of bike together, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, I see that now. Then maybe I was a little resentful,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not now. I see the great compassion and wisdom in that
Mm-hmm.
approach. And if everyone had that approach, you know, I think the world would be a more peaceful place,
Mm.
a kinder place. you know, a more generous place.
Hmm. So did you kind of struggle? Do you feel that in your heart you were struggling with that image, and what is it that caused that violence? You think in your innermost mind?
I was a creative, um,
Uh,
not particularly emotionally stable guy. I had strong emotions. I overreacted to many things. Um, and I was also shy. And so when I was younger, I used drugs and alcohol to make myself sort of fit into the world.
hmm.
Um, and that became a pretty serious problem. And I started to get into a lot of trouble when I was drinking and drugging because I would overreact to things. And when I was drinking, I really overreacted to things,
Hmm.
made very poor decisions, and started having sort of a psychic conflict, that I couldn't live up to the standard that was set, that I set
Hmm.
for myself, that my father was the role model for.
Hmm.
And then my father made a mistake
Hmm.
and had an affair. And eventually that affair led to divorce.
Hmm.
And that was a moral breach for me on
Hmm.
his part. And so my view of him got confused and everything got pretty mixed up there for a
How
while.
old were you when that happened? Do you remember?
Ninth grade.
Oh, so that happened. How old are you like at night? Like 12, 13? I don't know.
15.
15. Oh, so that, yeah, okay. So your father had this image, but that kind of shattered that a little bit for
Right.
you, and
And I overreacted to that and
mm,
tried to make myself even more rigidly moral. But I couldn't
mm,
live up to that standard. So there was a lot of conflict there.
wow.
Yeah.
Do you know any good jokes? I'm glad. That's a lot of good stuff. Is serious stuff, but it's good because I am interested. It interests me that you were over the years able to combat that, and you came to a point where you know how you can stay stable.
Yes.
Not everybody, I think, can do that, unless
It
they're,
wasn't easy,
yeah.
you know.
Hmm. Do you have? I remember. Wonder if you could share. I know you worked with prisoners at one point. Did you say?
So, in keeping with my father's
Hmm.
ethos,
Yeah.
I thought I had to be that type of person.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
it's important to say that I stopped drinking and drugging when I was quite young. I was 22 when I said no more for me,
Yeah.
and that was the beginning of being able to live a much clearer life.
Was that part of the moral code that you started to establish for yourself? Or
I
was that just you
realized
just
that I
had it?
could never live a moral code as long as I continued to drink and drug because I couldn't control who I was when I
Yeah.
was under the influence.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
and I got into some pretty serious trouble, and I hurt some people, and I wanted to make sure that would never happen again.
Mm.
You know, so when I graduated from college, my first job was working at a homeless shelter for alcoholics and drug addicts.
Mm.
And then I went on and worked at a juvenile detention center. I worked at community centers, always in the poorest neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was a drug and alcohol counselor for a number of years, both for mainly for adolescents.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I did all kinds of jobs like that, but I wasn't very good at it.
No.
It just wasn't my calling.
Oh.
You know, I was always thinking. You know,
Yeah.
I was always, wanting to change everything because the systems were flawed,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of focusing on the job that I actually had.
Mm. Those changes that you wanted to make were not related to the job that you
They
were
were,
doing?
but
Oh,
they
okay.
weren't going to happen because the systems are flawed. The way
Yeah.
in which payments and it's fee for services in social services,
Mm-hmm.
just like in medicine.
Yeah.
So the goal was to get the kid through the program so we could get paid. And there was never money
Uh,
to follow up to make sure that the program was successful.
yeah.
So we never really knew if what we were doing was working.
Yeah.
So, and I was like, we're just wasting taxpayer money here.
Yeah.
There was just the system it's just designed to fail in some way.
So that was a little discouraging, probably then. Huh?
It was discouraging and also disheartening.
Yeah.
I think working in the lockup facility for juveniles
Mm-hmm.
um, was a real hard experience for me
Mm.
because these kids, their lives were over.
Mm.
They were clueless, uneducated, and already in jail,
Mm.
and their prospects were very, very dim. And I didn't see a society that was willing to make serious sacrifice so that wouldn't happen.
Mm.
You know.
Have you ever come across any of those kids in your later life at all, or
No.
no? Huh? Because I do remember you told me about the story. You said it was pretty much kind of like a given up situation in a sense, or like there's no hope here. That was kind of like the place that you sort of arrived at, like these kids are kind of gone, so
Well,
something to that
in the
effect.
homeless shelter,
Yeah,
I started with, I'm going to help them, change their lives.
yeah.
To when I left 4 years later, it was my job is to keep them alive,
Mm.
you know?
Mm.
And that the idea that I could change a chronic alcoholic's life it was pie in the sky,
Mm.
you know?
But you had,
That wasn't my job. My job was to keep them
yeah.
alive, you know?
So it's a thing of like, because now you tell me, if you come from the story that you start with yourself saying you were able to bring yourself out of this sinking hole, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but you did it. But, so,
Yeah, let me say that I'm not saying that someone who's a chronic alcoholic in a homeless shelter can't change their lives,
yeah.
but it had nothing to do with me.
Oh, it's something that they have to want to do, you
Something
think?
that they have to want, and they have to
Okay.
want it deeply. You
What
know.
is something that inspires you?
Hmm.
Okay.
Uh,
Well, tell me something recently that has inspired you then.
I think that when I listen to people who can um, cut through the nonsense
Mm-hmm.
and speak honestly and openly and have hope, for the future, realistic hope,
Mm-hmm.
that is inspiring to me.
You met somebody like that?
I read a lot and listen to a lot of talk shows and, you
Yeah.
know, um, I think um, I think what's also hopeful is that if I try to let me say I've tried to help a few people in my life
Mm-hmm.
based on my own experience, and that the goal is not to become a perfect human being.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is to get slightly better than you presently are,
Hmm.
so you can live a little freer, you know. And I sort of started developing this idea of based on this metaphor of truing a wheel.
True in the wheel.
Yeah. So if
What?
you have a traditional bike with spokes,
Yeah.
um, the wheel will come out of true.
It'll bend a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you use the bike.
Yeah. Oh.
And so then you've got to true it up
Oh.
again, get back on the road, and then you'll get out of true, and then you true it up again, and that's a nice metaphor. That it's a constant job,
Hmm.
You know, you have to constantly work at it, and it's incremental. It's little adjustments all the time, and you
Mm-hmm.
just make incremental progress. And one day you wake up and you realize, wow, I really do feel a lot freer than I used to.
Mm.
And the other thing is skewing towards what you want. So let's use a dichotomy. I could hate more or love more. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I prefer to love more. So I'm gonna skew towards love.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I could
Hmm.
be more rigid or less rigid. I'm gonna skew towards less rigid. I
Mm.
could be more compassionate or less compassionate. I'm gonna skew. I'm not gonna be Mister. I'm not gonna be the Buddha.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be the compassionate one. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's unrealistic for me. I'm not that person,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I can be more compassionate in a given situation.
Mm-hmm. What is this? You mentioned the word freedom.
Freedom.
Yeah, you are more free if such and such a circumstances take place and whatever. So, what does this freedom look like to you?
I don't think it's a thing as much as a feeling
Yeah, how does that?
or a sensibility.
Okay.
Call it that. Um, if you are tortured by life, or if you think you have to do things because other people say you have to do them,
Mm-hmm.
if you're driven by wanting to improve yourself because your neighbor you think is richer than you, and so you got to be richer than your neighbor,
Mm-hmm.
that's not freedom to me,
Yeah.
you know. For me, that freedom is simply not getting in my own way,
Oh,
you know.
you gotta tell me more about that.
Um, if you meditate for years,
Yeah.
um, eventually you begin to see that you can um, get out of your way. So when you have a thought about doing something, you can just go do it,
Mm-hmm.
you know? I mean, so many people have thoughts and just
You
procrastinate
don't
or
have yourself telling
sidetrack
you, ah,
yourself
you can't do
or
it.
go around it or go
Yeah.
beside it or go over it or go under it instead of just going towards it.
Yeah.
It just helps you go towards things
Hmm.
versus away from things. It helps that I run my own business
Yeah.
because you just learn to just do what you have to do,
Hmm.
or else you have nothing. You have no money. You have nothing. So you just get up and do your job. You
Yeah.
know.
I remember one time you told me something. I wonder if you will remember, because it's one of those things that I remember and that I remember as being pretty profound, but I don't quite remember the format. I can remember some of the format, so maybe if I repeat the format to me, can see if you can remember exactly how you put it. But it was something of the difference between a craftsman, and just a worker or something like that, or a person who's a real craftsman and a person that's just somebody who learned something. And you said, and we were talking about one of your workers, and you said that he was a real craftsman because he literally almost like created things. It wasn't like he duplicated things. Do you remember that at all when you told me that? So I guess I'll just have to live with the feeling.
I mean, there is a difference between a craftsperson and
Yeah.
someone who just reproduces things,
Okay. Yes. What is that?
though.
That's what I think. That's what it was.
It, unfortunately, it's a level of obsessiveness
Mm-hmm.
that to be a great craftsman, I think you have to have somewhat of a obsessive personality
Mm-hmm.
to take each step and try to make it as perfect as you can,
Yeah.
you know? And if it's not perfect, you go back to the previous step and get that right and then move on to the next step.
Hmm.
The goal being at the end that you have achieved you have created something of beauty. You know, so I guess beauty plays a really key role there.
Hmm.
That craftsmanship and beauty are linked.
Yeah, but that's good, but that wasn't it.
No, but
But it was
that's what I
profound.
got.
It was profound because it described your other work very well, and I thought, yeah, that's a big difference. But anyway, I do notice one of the things I notice about your work is that you have that somewhat obsessive, like this has to come out perfect, and you kind of also uh, expect the people that you're guiding to also have that kind of a level of put in that level of effort to do that. What do you think that came from in your life? What do you think you inherited that from?
I think it's a respect for the object.
Respect for the object.
Yes.
Hmm.
And if you have a respect for the object, you're going to treat it
Hmm.
with as much care as you can.
Uh,
And to treat it as sort of whatever is to
mm-hmm.
disrespect the object in a way,
Huh.
you know? And to disrespect, since especially the work I work on
Mm-hmm.
is a lot of historically important objects.
Yes.
It's a disrespect to history.
Hmm.
It's a disrespect to the designer.
Hmm.
It's a disrespect to the future of that object.
Hmm.
Because that object, being an important object, should be able to live into the future in the best condition it can.
Hmm.
And so our job as restorers is to bring it to the best condition we can so its future is as good as it can be.
Hmm.
Is that?
It makes sense, especially the field that,
Yeah.
that we're kind of dealing with. So tell me about your family a little bit, though. Like, what kind of a person was your mother, for example?
My mother was a fairly remarkable woman.
Hmm.
Um, she wouldn't be considered remarkable in by a lot of standards that America uses, but she was the type of person who spent her whole life being of service in many ways. You
Mm-hmm.
know, um, she was very involved in the Catholic Church and ran all the organizations that the Catholic Church runs behind the scenes,
Mm-hmm.
raising money, putting on, shows, crafts fairs, this, that, the next thing, to make everything work, you know? And she did that her entire life until she recently passed away at 94.
Hmm.
And she was still the treasurer of the Women's Guild
Hmm.
um, at 94 years old. She was a docent um, at the Worcester Art Museum. She was a docent at.
What's a docent?
It's someone who walks around the gallery and
Oh, okay.
talks about works and stuff.
Wow.
Um, she was a docent at the one of the Worcester historical houses, at the Worcester Historical Society. Um, the Woman's Guild, Our Lady of this, Our Lady of that, all these religious organizations,
Mm-hmm.
um, her whole life, you know.
So you had a little foray into that. You told me a story that had to do with you distributing religious books.
Yes,
Yeah. You want to tell me that story again? Because it's an interesting story.
sure.
And what type of religious books were these, by the way? Were these like from the Catholic Church or something else? Or
Christian,
doesn't matter? Christian? Okay.
yeah. It was a Christian company. I didn't know that at the time, though.
You didn't know that. Okay.
I was young. I was 18. I didn't really know anything.
Yeah.
I had never lived on my own. My mother fed me every day and did my laundry and made my bed. I didn't really know anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had no real life experience.
Yeah.
And I got this job for this company because someone in my neighborhood made a lot of money in a summer working for this company.
Mm-hmm.
It was a summer job only.
Yeah.
And it was selling books door to door. We sold the Webster Student Handbook, the 5-book pictorial Bible,
Oh.
the Bible Reader, which was like a educational Bible resource book,
Mm-hmm.
and a few other things. I had a little bookcase, and I worked. It was a hard job. You worked 13 and a half hours a day,
Mm-hmm.
6 days a week, and on the seventh day, you went to training. So no days off. It was hard. And if you didn't sell, you didn't earn any money at all.
Mm.
So you could work 13 and a half hours in a day and not sell anything, and you would have made nothing.
Mm.
So it was a hard job, and I was really young. So, and it was a kind of a funny company. So being young and innocent and ignorant, they said to me, you get off the bus with your guys, your little team, there's 4 people to a team, and you start knocking on doors to find a place to live.
Yeah.
So I'm 18, I get off the bus, I walk to the neighborhood that's our territory, and I start knocking on doors. And the third door I knocked on, someone answered. I said, hey, you know anyone who has a place for me and my 3 friends to live? And they're like, yeah, sure, come on in. So I'm thinking, hey, this is easy,
Mm.
So we got a place to live, $10 a month. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know that was like free. Um, so to thank them for letting us live in their house, I said, I'll go get some food, you know.
Mm.
So I went to a supermarket, and I bought all this food. I got some, steaks and whatever,
Mm.
And I get to the cash register, and I realize I don't have any money. And the cashier says to me, "Don't worry about it."
Mm.
And I'm like, "You sure?" I said, "I'll be back in 10 minutes with the money." He goes, "No, that's not necessary. I'll take care of it."
Mm.
Now, being innocent, I was like, "Gee, that's really nice. Thanks."
Mm-hmm.
Not realizing, wow, that is very extraordinary that
Mm.
a cashier would pay for your food.
Mm.
Um, so I went to the house. We had this barbecue, blah, blah, blah. A few weeks later, I'm knocking on doors. You know, we started at 7 a.m. If someone knocked on my door at 7 a.m., I'd be like, hey, pal, what are you crazy? Get
Mm.
out of here. So I'm knocking on doors at 7 a.m. and a woman answers, and I go through my little spiel, and the first thing out of her mouth was, Jesus was definitely not a white man. And I was like, what? What do you talk about? Because in my mind, I grew up with the white Jesus, he was like,
Mm-hmm.
looked like, any, wasp or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we get into this religious conversation, and I end up spending the entire day at this woman's house.
Mm.
And she was a Baha'i. And the Baha'i believes that the second coming of Christ has already happened in
Mm-hmm.
the late 1800s, and that we lived in an advanced society, so proselytizing was unnecessary. So he would give you their book, and if you liked it, you would join their organization, their religion.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out I met a lot of Baha'is that summer, and they were all wonderful people.
Mm.
So anyhow, it's getting late in the day. I've been talking to this woman for like 9 hours. You know,
Wow.
we had this sprawling religious conversation, very enlightening for me because I never really had those conversations with anyone.
Mm.
And she says, "Well, my husband will be home soon. Why don't you just wait and we'll have dinner together?" And I'm like, "Okay, sure, why not?" And her husband walks in, and I'm dumbfounded. She's like, "What's wrong?" I was like, her husband turns out to be the cashier.
Mm.
And I thought, wow, someone's trying to tell me something here.
Yeah.
That was an interesting moment in my life,
Mm.
you know?
That's very interesting.
So that, being real, being present, being honest, breeds interesting events.
Hmm. Are you
Some people would have
always
taken that as a religious experience,
hmm
but I didn't.
so are you always seeking to be more real as you walk through life? So one of your goals, you think, or
I think
progressively?
ideally,
Yeah.
yes, but the pressures of actually living one's life
Mm-hmm.
sometimes get in the way. Running a company isn't always easy. It's often very stressful, and
Mm-hmm.
stress often clouds the mind.
So in terms of also like when you're real, when I think of being real, for example, I'm thinking of okay, you are who you are, and there's a lot of things inside of you that a lot of people don't know about you. They only can see the outside. So one way that you can potentially not be real is by masquerading the outside with something that is not really on the inside.
I I I I think I learned something interesting once, that who's like your mother knows you as
Mm-hmm.
isn't necessarily who other people know you as.
Mm-hmm.
We are not the same person to everybody. We try to be, but often we're not, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so different roles breed different qualities in one's personality, you know? As the boss, right? I'm focused on a certain task oriented world, needing the product, got to get the product out. So it's very sort of, you know,
Mm-hmm.
small in some ways,
Mm.
you know?
Do you have a story in your life that you read or a book that you read and you thought, wow, this has been a very, very powerful influence in my life, in who I am, who I am becoming, big pieces of who I am? Or whether a story or, I don't know, a story could be in the form of a book or a movie or a story that someone told
So
you.
there's probably hundreds,
Yeah.
you know, um, and there continues to be powerful events,
Mm-hmm.
but I've learned to discount a little bit,
Hmm.
a powerful response to a movie, let's say,
Yeah.
because it doesn't have long lasting effect generally.
Yeah.
It makes you feel
Huh.
important and enlightened, but it not necessarily enlightening.
Right.
I realize enlightening happens through discipline and rigor,
Mm-hmm.
daily practice,
Hmm.
day in, day out.
Hmm.
And change comes slow, and you don't recognize it until in the future you see yourself in a slightly different place than you were in the past.
Do you journal at all?
Um, I used to write down all those stories, um, with the self hypnosis,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't journal per se.
Write down. You don't write down it like to see, look back
No.
and say, oh.
But I'm a cumulative type of mind, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah.
So everything I read, I try to, decide whether I need to change other aspects of my life because this has opened my mind to something new,
Mm-hmm.
or whether it's just an addition to something I already believe in, So I'm always evaluating
Mm-hmm.
the world in which I live and what I read and who I listen to, you know. And things have lives, right? Um, our road was much rockier when we first started working together, and it's
Mm-hmm.
a lot smoother now,
Oh, that was fun.
you know. So we've adjusted to each other,
Hmm.
tried to understand who each other was, and work with who we are instead of trying to make the other person someone they're not,
Hmm.
you know.
Do you find that you ever put? I, you're talking about uh, the growth process, if I understand correctly, you're sort of saying the growth, whatever growth process that happens within you that you can kind of quantify maybe by looking back and seeing the change and the progress and the things that you learned that you didn't know before and so forth. Do you find that in terms of how you view other people, do you ever find yourself categorize them in any kind of hierarchy in those?
Sure, I'm as shallow as the next guy quite often, you know,
That's not
and
what I
as
meant.
judgmental as the
Yeah,
next guy.
yeah.
Um,
Well, that's
uh,
that's another question. But anyway, go ahead because that's great that you are able to look at yourself like that and recognize parts of who you are that either need work or don't need work, or you enjoy about yourself or don't enjoy about yourself. You're capable of doing that
I'm
pretty,
capable of recognizing it.
yeah,
Changing it isn't always easy,
yeah.
you know.
Hmm.
Um, you put me under a little stress. You cut my hours of sleep a little bit. You don't feed me well enough. You know, I skip a few days of meditation, and I
Yeah,
can be a little rough around the edges.
yeah,
You know, uh,
yeah.
and you know, not really in control and kind of mean and stupid. You
Hmm.
know, and as a result of me slipping so easily,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little more conscious than some people of the fact that I can't let myself slip much at all,
Hmm.
you know,
But
or
you have,
else I lose control, you know.
but you have that awareness, which is interesting. You know, you have somewhat of a an awareness of a pattern or a method or whatever you want to call it. That you know, if these things don't come together, something gets off kilter.
Yes,
So,
very sensitive to being off kilter. I don't do anything to alter my mind.
mm-hmm.
I don't even drink coffee,
Yeah.
and so I'm always in my own body,
Hmm.
you know.
Is that a good thing?
It is the thing, whether it's good or bad. It's how my mind works, you know.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing to be aware.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wish I was way more aware. I wish I could meditate 5 hours a day. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I know if I did, that I would be, you know,
Why don't you get up earlier?
a, a much, a much better person. Let's say, you know,
Hmm.
a more compassionate person, or a kinder person, or more sympathetic person, a more understanding person.
Do you feel that we owe compassion or kindness or sympathy to everyone? Or
I think that the more one, whether they pray or meditate, engage in self reflection,
mm-hmm.
I think compassion is a byproduct of that.
Hmm.
It comes naturally.
So will compassion be also defined, or is forgiveness a part of that? You think, or
I think forgiveness is linked to compassion.
yeah.
Yes. Let's say that you had a really bad week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you're having trouble with your wife or whatever. You guys are just in some conflict, or you had a back pain and you couldn't sleep in combination with not getting along with your wife, and your daughter was giving you grief, or
Mm-hmm.
her her husband, or whatever, your financial, let's say, it was just a whole ball, right?
Yeah.
And you were grouchy by the end of the week, you know, and you grouched on me, you know. um, if I was in a good place, then I would be able to see that something wasn't right with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't blame you for getting grouchy at me. I would try to understand how I could help you find your stride again.
Mm. But you wouldn't know all those things though that
I
I'm
think,
thinking about.
but I would know that something wasn't right
Something wasn't right.
because I would be clear-eyed,
Oh, yeah.
right? I think we know each other enough where we can see.
Mm-hmm.
You came in the other day, you said, "Friend, you're looking a little more tired than usual. What's going on?"
Yeah.
That type of thing.
Ah.
You were being observant.
What is one thing that we're talking a little bit about the things that you do to stay in balance. So there's some active things, some effort things that you have to do.
Hmm.
Some of them just they have to be done over time. You have to kind of have to continue to do them. But yeah, there are times when you find yourself where you can just put all that away and just be completely comfortable or at
I
comfort
can be comfortable if I do those things every
if you
day.
do those things. Okay, if
Yeah.
those things don't happen, then
I get
you kind of
uncomfortable.
get uncomfortable. Okay,
I get caught in my own head,
yeah,
you
you
know,
just start overthinking things, or
worrying about things, you
yeah,
know. I mean, I can worry about work, but that
yeah,
doesn't make the work
yeah,
go faster or be better or anything. It's
right,
not really useful.
right. Well, that's
It's
the thing. That's kind of like the thing that I'm curious about because I talk to people that have that awareness. Like, I know that worrying about this is not gonna do anything, but I still do it. So where's it? Where's the bridge? Do you think? Where?
so if you really wanted to get rid of that,
Yeah,
you would have to go all out, you know? You'd have to join the monastery or join the Buddhist temple and
yeah,
go for the 12-hour day of meditation day in, day out.
yeah.
In 15 years from now, you may be a little Buddha, you know?
How about this thought? How about the thought that those are simply part of who we are and we just live with them? What do you think about that?
I think we have to live with them.
Yeah,
Um,
because
but
we're talking about that
you
analogy.
remember the idea I had of skewing
Yeah.
towards things?
Yes.
Well, I could be more fretful
Yes.
or less fretful,
Right.
more worried or less worried. So if I want to be less worried,
Yeah.
what can I do to be less worried? You know?
Yeah.
Well, I can try to organize my work schedule, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's doable, right? So I come in every day and I have a goal that's a manageable goal and I achieve that goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Each day as much as I can, and that relieves a lot of stress.
Yeah.
I cannot call back my clients the day they call me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or I can call them back.
Yeah.
And in calling them back quickly, I close more sales and have more work.
Right.
It's easier.
Yeah.
Or I can be lazy and say I don't want to do it because I'm irritable or I'm tired. But that doesn't cause less problems.
Yeah.
That causes more problems.
And you apply these principles also to your private life, not just your work.
Yeah, now, as you know, being in a relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the goodwill in the world doesn't necessarily make it go smoothly.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes. Yeah.
Sometimes, the little stupid things
Yeah.
get in the way. Like, honey, I've told you 100 times to put the cap on this and you won't. What is wrong with you? And you're like, it's not important.
Yeah.
And your wife may be, well, it's important to me.
Yeah.
And you can dig in your heels because, you know, that's just what
Right.
happens sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as you well know, digging in your heels is usually not a good solution
Yeah.
to the problem. So eventually you've got to undig your heels and be like,
Mm.
okay, honey, tell me why this bothers you.
Mm.
Yes, I think I can put the cap on the toothpaste. I don't think that's past me,
But I may leave it sometime in the future again. And
Periodically,
yeah.
it may not go as
Yeah.
smoothly as we like.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And if you can give me a little slack on this is not one of my strengths. So good communication, but, let's face it, we're all imperfect,
It's not perfect. Yeah.
and sometimes you you fight.
Mm. Let's travel back in time a little bit.
Okay?
So I want you to travel with me in your mind a little bit. Go back as far as you can where we need to go. We're gonna go to a place where you found yourself where you were like, boy, I am really satisfied right now, and I could say that I am experiencing what I would call happiness.
Hmm.
what does that conjure up in, that you can go back in your life and say this was the day or the time?
The hundreds of times I've come out of meditation.
Hmm. There's no one thing in the past that you can point out the outside of that?
Like I
Because you
said,
started meditation years ago, but before then, were you
I started meditation a long time ago,
about 40 years ago, let's say?
30 some odd
30.
years ago. Yeah.
Before those 30 years, was it just like
I'm not sure. I think happiness was fleeting then.
fleeting?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I might have had sex and
Yeah.
thought, oh, wow, this is living, you know? Um,
All right, you
you know,
remember that one.
right? Uh, or, you know, or I might have been with my buddies out camping, right? And
Yeah.
said, oh, this is a great,
You
we are
used to
having a
go
great
camping? You like to
time.
go camping with your
I've
friends?
done a great deal of camping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you like to travel a lot. You tell I really
Yeah,
like
mainly I hiked and
hike,
camped
yeah.
when I traveled. You
Yeah.
know, hiked, camped, canoed. You know, um, so I don't see those things in the same way as I see happiness now.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I even use that word much anymore. Happiness,
What do you use? What do you think?
contentedness.
Contentedness. Yes.
Yes, at peace.
Yes.
You know, fully grounded. Like,
Very interesting.
yeah.
I just want to share a little something with you. You know that sometimes we talk about the Bible and so forth. And
Yes.
so, contentment is a word that the Apostle Paul uses
Hmm.
in a very, very key passage that a lot of Christians look to and think, oh, okay, well, how do I get there? And it's a place where he says, whether in want or whether in abundance, I have learned to be content. And when he says that, when you read that, you sense that, Paul's not fooling around here. He really is telling the truth. It doesn't matter what his state is. He puts it in that sense. I have learned to be content, as if I achieved this place. It's pretty amazing.
I think a lot of people struggle with loving themselves
Hmm.
as well. Now, a lot of people would say that's self-indulgence. That's the self-indulgent culture we live in, a therapeutic culture.
Mm-hmm.
I think I disagree with that.
Mm-hmm.
If you can love yourself, then you're not going to beat yourself up much. You know, you're going to make mistakes, and you realize you'll look at the mistake, see it clearly, and move on. You know,
Mm.
you show compassion towards yourself as well as others. You know,
Mm.
we are imperfect.
Mm.
We make mistakes. We lose our, you know,
Hmm.
control sometimes. You know, we cause harm periodically. You know,
Yeah.
and we try to correct and move on and apologize.
You're forgiven. I'm just, I'm just kidding with you. You know that. Well, that's great. That's great, Fran. That's a good piece of advice. Which brings me to this.
Hmm.
I want you to think that someday somebody might be just flicking through the internet or whatever, and then, oh, hey, look, people of interest. Who is this guy? Oh, Fran Trainor. So, to that person that happens to stumble upon that, what would you say you would have something that you want to share? And say, this would be the thing that I would share. Like if I had something, if it was the last hour of my life, let me just say this. What would that be?
I would say that contentedness.
Yeah, you can look at the camera as you say that because the person will be listening.
I would say contentedness is more valuable than achievement.
Content, contentment,
Contentment is more valuable than
more
achievement.
valuable than achievement.
And ironically, will probably allow you to achieve more in a much more real way, you know,
I
versus
can
an accumulation way. You
I
know?
can vouch for that because I know that you are. I think you made some great achievements in the things that you do. I think you do very good work. You have really established yourself well in what you do. So I think you have authority to say that. So that's great. That would be what you want to share. Well, you know what? We are at the end.
Miguel, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on your show.
Thank you so much for driving all the way here, friend. I appreciate it. And thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time when we invite the next person to share their story.